You're listening to Crush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Crush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at crushperformance.com.
And welcome to Crush Performance, everybody. I am Jeff Gershell, and we're your weekly source for performance information. Welcome back to the show. Show number 2 in our spring training, spring baseball series. And today, it is going to be a fantastic show as we dive into the world of pitching with a former colleague of mine and an elite pitching coach in the game today, Hector Barrios. I can't wait to introduce you guys to Hector and everything that he's been doing for pitchers at every level of the game. So very, very interesting things coming up. Hey, listen, if you are new to the show is all about creating coachable players. Everything that goes on behind the scenes to help athletes become more coachable and have more success in their sport. It's definitely a long game, and there are so many variables that it's almost countless, but we cover it all on the show. So welcome if you're a new listener, and if you're a solid seasoned crusher, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited about this series we have going right now. Now listen, even if you're not a baseball family or a baseball coach or a baseball player, we often see the professional teams, for example, collaborating and visiting other sports to see what's going on and to see if there's anything new that they can bring back to their worlds to help their athletes perform. I think we need to start doing the very same thing, especially at the developmental levels, and where we're starting to see more and more specialization, players and young athletes just sort of honing into only one single sport. Understanding the other sports and learning from the other sports is really, really important. One, in terms of how we organize performance planning, but also for young athletes, playing and experiencing other sports can build a robustness that you just can't get anywhere else, right? Playing soccer can really help a hockey player. Playing squash can certainly help a baseball player. There's playing basketball as an off-season sport, or looking at a off-season sport that is complementary. And if you can build a cardiovascular base through another sport, there is so many benefits. I can't even begin there. So there's a lot of reasons that you should be looking to other sports, and that's kind of what this baseball series is all about if you're not a baseball athlete, coach, or family. So what we're going to be talking about is, some of the issues and trends that we're seeing in the game. The injury trends, for example, in baseball are at all-time highs. Why? Well, from Major League Baseball right down to the developmental levels, we're trying to figure that out. We have a good idea. How do we course correct that? There's going to be a lot to learn for every other sport because we're seeing similar trends in literally every sport. And if we can collaborate, share ideas, share what we've learned, share what strategies we're going to implement, that's just better for our athletes, period. So I hope that everybody can really walk away from these baseball shows that we're airing here as the baseball season gets set to kick off here. Because there's valuable information for any sport. Now, if you are a baseball player, and today, if you are a pitcher, you're going to want to get your notepads out, because I've known Hector for years. He and I worked with the Blue Jays way, way back in the day. He was a player that came into the Blue Jays as a coach, and now he went and progressed in his coaching career from team to team, moving up the ladder, and he now runs an elite pitching program called HBL Pitching. You could check his stuff out at hblpitching.com. Incredible videos, incredible information there, and if you need to contact Hector, you can for sure. The game of baseball is facing some major issues, and the biggest one is the injury rates, right? I mean, that is number one. From our pros all the way down to grassroots, it is a huge issue for everybody. It's so important and such a major issue, in fact, that for the first time, Major League Baseball initiated a research project looking at why and how these injuries are happening. Because we always say it, even in programming for our athletes, if you want to solve a problem, you had better truly understand the problem. And that's exactly the approach that Major League Baseball is taking right now. For the 8th or 9th year in a row that we see historically higher injury rates, We're finally getting to the point where we're going, what is going on? Because listen, at the pro level where Major League Baseball operates, right? Every organization has, 4 minor league teams, and they usually have an organization or a facility at their spring training complex with a few extra players. And most organizations will have a shared facility or their own facility in the Dominican or Venezuela down south to help other players develop as well. So, these organizations are massive and they're worried about their players. So, with some of the smartest people in sports and sports science, the injury rates are continuing to rise. That alone is concerning, right? But if we really take a 330,000 foot view to see what's going on in the game, I think the picture goes much deeper than what's happening in the pros. I believe that the players that make it to elite sport, the men and women who work their way through a sporting system and actually achieve their goals of playing on a national team or signing a scholarship or, actually competing and signing a contract in professional sports, for the most part, they're the survivors of a very broken developmental model. And it is broken. Make no mistake. If we can understand, or if you can understand better why these things are happening, you could protect your players, or you as an athlete can really start thinking about how you're going about your business. That's honestly what the show's all about, right? When it comes to baseball, Major League Baseball interviewed 300 plus experts, orthopedic surgeons, trainers, GMs, coaches, former and current players, and ask the question, what do you feel is going on in the game? What is one of the major or some of the major issues that's contributing to the injury rates we're seeing in the game? Well, for me, it's very simple. It's no one thing. It's a combination of a bunch of things for sure. But we are destroying young baseball players. We're destroying young athletes with good intentions, right? We need to take a step back and understand the ebb and flow of long-term development. If that's all we do, we will save so many athletes from injury and potential surgical interventions, but will also, I believe, be heightening the level of overall performance across the board. It hasn't happened yet. We're slowly maybe working that way, but there's a lot of issues. So today, we're going to talk about pitching, because if you look in Major League Baseball last year, there was over $1 billion spent on players who were injured and couldn't play the game. That's why Major League Baseball is investing so much time and effort into trying to solve this crazy problem. The majority of that $1 billion or $1.04 billion was spent on pitchers who were injured. And if we were to go to the minor leagues and then to youth baseball, we would see very similar injury trends. And it is devastating. Some of the injuries we're seeing at 12, 13, 14 years of age, injuries we never even used to see in professional sport till players were well into the twilight years of their career. So we've got some bad trends going on, and all we have to do is understand it so we can fix it. And that's what today's conversation is all about. So let's get after it. I am so excited about this conversation and to introduce you to my good friend, Hector Barrios. Let's get to that interview right now. All right, everybody, welcome to the pitching edition of our spring training series with my good friend and former colleague from the way back in the Blue Jay days, Hector Barrios. Hector, thanks so much for joining the show here, man. I'm really excited about this conversation.
You know, it's funny that you just said that, and I have one of my Toronto jerseys back there. I think
I
it's
see it.
that one over there. So
I love it.
that's our connection. You're
Yeah.
my connection.
Yeah, way back in the day, we sort of came into the organization, way back then in the mid 90s at the same time. And it was actually, Hector, that was a pretty exciting time in baseball. I think that was sort of the start of a new trend. I was the first full-time minor league strength and conditioning coach for the Blue Jays, and I was the third in all of baseball. It was a time of change. What an exciting time in the game back then.
It was. It's funny because I was in the game just one year in '97, and I came over in '98. I didn't have a job after my first season, and Jimmy Hoff calls me. And he calls me on Christmas Day, and he asked me if I was interested in working and all that stuff. And then the question I have for him is like, why would you call me on Christmas Day? And he goes, because if you're a family man, you're gonna be home with your family on that day. So I know it was a good time to catch you. I was like, wow.
Oh, wow. Jim Hoff, boy, oh
Yeah.
boy.
And
There is a baseball person right there that impacted countless lives on and off the field. You know, he helped a lot of players and coaches develop and really reach their potential. He, for me, is amongst the baseball royalty for sure.
yeah, and he was the first one that I was able to have a relationship with. I felt comfortable coming up to him and talking to him. He was such a people person, like he cared. But the funny thing is that he called me, and then I was like, "Wow, that was a really good conversation," and I didn't hear from him again. And then it was like, the start of the next semester, so I went to the local community college so I could finish, the what I had left over. And he calls me on the day that I had enrolled, and all. I took a full schedule, and he calls me up and he tells me, so Hector, are you ready for me to make the offer? I said, offer, Jimmy, I just came back from school. I registered for the semester. It's like kind of like a little too late. And then I asked him before he hung up. I said, you were going to make me an offer. What was that offer? And then he told, he offered it to me. And I said, can I call you back by Monday? And he said, yes. And I ended up changing my course and going on with the Blue Jays and meeting you for the first time.
Oh man. Hey, what a turning point in your life then, because you had a great playing career up to then. And
Um,
was it your goal after your playing career? Was coaching part of your focus, Hector?
Yes, because back then I felt that the Latino section didn't have too many Spanish speaking coaches, and I served as an interpreter most of my time as a player. So they would call me over, Hector, can you explain this to like a certain amount of Dominicans or Venezuelans that didn't speak any English at all, and that kind of like spurred my feeling of wanting to coach to help that side, the Spanish side, because I spoke two
Oh,
languages.
I love it. Hey, what a great connector that is for a lot of those players coming up there into this foreign territory, right? Where there's not a lot of Spanish going on. Back in the day, it's really, really inclusive now. And also the focus on development down in the Latin America regions, man. Oh man, the talent pool there. Wow.
Yes, and then now you go and some of those facilities in the Dominican Republic are even nicer than the ones in the States for some organizations. They're like brand
Yeah.
new with state of the art stuff, and it's just incredible the
Yeah.
attention they get in the Dominican.
Yeah, so we have a great history, everybody. If you want to check out Hector's stuff, go to hlbpitching.com. Fantastic resource here. And Hector, I just love, oh boy, getting we just saw each other at a conference in Vancouver here, and for the first time in decades. And I'm so you were just showing me some of your stuff. I'm really intrigued. You know, we had Bob File on the show here last week. You remember Bob File?
Of course.
Yes, of course. Listen, very interesting story, kind of like yours. He was drafted by the Blue Jays as a third baseman. You were, of course, a center fielder and
Uh,
then worked your way into pitching and for a number of organizations in your playing days. And then you got into coaching, right? And then you went through a number of organizations. Hey, just let's talk about your pathway into the game and also into coaching and maybe what you learned from the different organizations, because I still find even today the different organizations have their little nuances in how they handle things. How's that helped you as a player, and how's that helped you really expand your thinking as a coach?
so getting back to my initial like change, it was another thing that happened. I was a center fielder. I was going to school in Oklahoma, in Warner, Oklahoma, school by the name of Connor State College. And I get drafted as a center fielder, and they wanted me to pitch, and I'm like, they wanted me to pitch. You're so athletic that we believe with the type of arm that you have that you can make the adjustment to get to the big leagues a lot faster than if you're an outfielder, center fielder. And I was like, you know what? I was convinced, and I had to start learning how to pitch at the professional level. And the first day that I was on the bench, I learned one tremendous lesson that took me for the rest of my playing career, which is I sat next to Dave Roberts and Mark Dijon, I think is the coach's name, and they both said something during the middle of the game. A guy tried to steal third, he got thrown out, and then Dave Roberts turns to Mark Dijon and goes, "Didn't they teach him that you can't try to steal third with no outs or with two outs?" And I was like, I didn't know that. And I was a center fielder. but that already gave me like an idea. It's like, wow, so that means when I'm on the mound, I don't really have to worry about him so much with no outs and get the hitter out, or with 2 outs, really focus on the hitter. And I was like, wow, if I stay here for the amount of days of the schedule, that means I'm going to learn 72 things in my very first year. So I'm going to hang out here and learn as much as I could. So that's kind of what got my wheels turning, and how to develop and apply whatever I was learning on my in my game. And I started, like, having success right away.
Yeah, interesting. We're seeing a massive change. I've got some friends in the Florida organization right now, and on that big league staff, and again, we'll have to go back and check, but I think a lot of the coaches never really played the game at the highest level, and we're starting to see a change there. And I think maybe it's adding to the thinking. But we talk about Jimmy Hoff there. All of the organizations you were with: Detroit, Toronto, the Mets, the Dodgers, and the Phillies as a coach. And I know all those organizations operate very differently. How did that sort of take you to where you're at now, Hector?
Well, the beautiful thing about that is that I was with the 5 different organizations, and they have 5 different philosophies. So I was able to go from one to the other. And what I would see in regards to like injuries, because we get the whole reports of injuries and how many for the year, and what did we do that possibly led to injuries. So what I started to do was keep whatever was working that I saw, kept the pitches healthy, maybe gain more velocity, and the ones that kind of like linked to the injuries, I kind of like discarded those, and I just kept kind of like putting things together over my course of the year. And then when I got to the Dodgers, it was like the very first time that I heard the coaching staff, the pitching coaching staff, talking about the use of the legs, how to use the backside, the front side together, and incorporate that up the kinetic chain. And that really, first of all, I butted heads because I had a belief system going in, and then I was able to slowly but surely, like, disengage with the belief system I had, to understanding this one. And ever since I learned that one, it changed my whole perspective, my whole career, because I've seen nothing but like skyrockets to the big leagues, from having a guy named Jose De Leon becoming, from extended spring, the number one right-handed prospect when he was a favor signed, for the pitching coach. That was the coordinator. He was a kid from Puerto Rico. Do me a favor, get this kid drafted. He got drafted. He was with me with a 7.50 ERA after his first year. And after we finished extended spring, he got to the big leagues in 2 years and 2 months. And that was the first time I applied what I had learned. And I was like, whoa. And then from then on, just Pedro Baez, to name a few, Ross Stripling. We had with the Phillies, Ranger Suarez, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Connor Brogdon, a lot of the guys that ended up going up there. It was, because of the stuff we had done at the lower level. So I learned a lot from the Dodgers to this point, and I've seen the best ERAs in the league. Guys getting to the big leagues, healthy arms. So I have a belief system on what I do because of what I learned.
Yeah, I love it. What a great story. And there's a message here for players, parents, coaches, organizations for sure. A couple of weeks ago, we had on a gentleman by the name of Kevin Tyler, who is the president of Altus, which is one of the world renowned track and field, speed development programs on earth. And he said something very interesting, Hector. We started talking about some of the challenges in youth sport and developmental sport now, and we got into the conversation of specialization. And Kevin brought up a really interesting point, and you sparked it for me here. He said, yes, specialization, it kind of pigeonholes you to one sport, and you might lose some of the experiences you would get from those other sports that can really help raise your abilities. He said, but another thing, when you kind of pigeoned into one sport, you miss out on experiencing different coaches as well and different philosophies. I thought that was a very, very powerful statement. And hearing you, just like a player working up, from organization to organization opportunity, you did the same as a coach, working the way up and learning from all this. And now you are a pitching powerhouse, really influencing the industry right now. And I think that's a tremendous just thought that parents and players and organizations should maybe take a little heed on, or take time to spend a second thinking about that.
Yes. Well, you only first of all you have to have an open mind. If
Yeah.
you're a person that just sees things with the blinders and that's all you see, yes, it works for me as an athlete. I'm where I want to go. But as a coach, you have to be so open minded, and you have to also learn, because I don't think that you're brought up with the leadership part of it, the empathy part of it, the things that you have to really understand that other person. Like, get to understand, because I'm servicing that player. I'm servicing a coach that I'm working with. I'm servicing. So because I'm servicing, I'm going to be open minded to see things that I would normally not see, just putting myself in the lens of the people that are looking at me.
Yeah.
And that
I love that.
that has paid such a big dividend for me as a coach, because it's just like now I can really relate to someone because I'm asking questions. I want to know what, ticks, what the thought, the belief, the experience, how that trajectory got to me. Then I'll be able to help the best I can.
Yeah, I love it. And that's what it's all about. It's about relationships, right, Hector? If you really get down to it, it's about relationships, and everybody has their own little thing. It's very individual, right? And being able to build those relationships, that is step number one in helping anybody tap into their potential.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. I mean, that's I think that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Exactly what we're talking about. That's where it's at. It's that relationship, that ability to have somebody know that first and foremost you care. Like, you're asking these questions, but they know there's a sincerity behind what you're doing. You have the information for them to grow and and live out the dreams that they want to live. But it's how you get that pathway to him, to establish that relationship, that they feel so comfortable, vulnerable, whatever the term you want to use, or the verbiage you want to use in regards to getting that person to go on that course that that they're capable of going on.
Yeah, I love it. Hector, we look at man, oh man, over time, I've got a couple big questions for you here. And this one is a tremendous one. You just mentioned the facilities down in some of the Latino countries down there, down south. They rival or even better than some of the things we're seeing now in the States. And that's a very important part. The investment in player development. Back in the day when you and I were at the Blue Jays, if you remember the weight room, it was like the size of this office, right? It was crazy. Now we see the Blue Jays, they have maybe one of the crown jewels of player development, not just in baseball, but all of sport. That player development facility they have in Florida in Dunedin is unbelievable. I saw it for the first time last year coming out of COVID. But boy, oh boy, has it ever changed? Let's talk about your time. And this is the first big question. Boy, oh boy. And it's a big one. Changes in the game. Pitching is such a big part of the game. It always has been. But now we're not, just beyond professional sports, the emphasis and pressure on young athletes as well. Let's talk about some of the changes you've seen. I've seen tremendous changes on my side of the game, of course, in terms of strength and conditioning, talent development, skill acquisition, all this stuff. But in terms of pitching and just the game in general, what are some of your thoughts as we look through the timeline of your career, Hector?
Well, when I first started coaching, the person that used to be in the forefront was Tom House,
Yeah.
and he was the first guy that I was kind of like shown that he was the teacher. I didn't know anything about him, but I had a kid that you know very well, Brian Bowles. Brian
Yeah.
Bowles was one of his disciples, so to speak, one of the
Yeah.
kids that he had on his videos when he first started coaching. So I started to learn that he was teaching certain things, and that's the first time that I got kind of like my mind open to what was out there versus what's in front of me. But then as time has gone on, then strength and conditioning started to play a big part. When I was at the Mets, we also had a guy named I forget his name. He was a big guy, football. Came from a football background. Uh, he had like a name that was oh, Nitro. That was his name. I don't know if you ever met
That
him.
was his nickname. It wasn't Polquin, was it? Polquin? I know who you're talking about. I forget his name as well.
Nitro was a massive man. He comes from a football background, but then they started to see like there was like a bunch of uh, the testing that went on before they even got on the field. But then things like that started to happen, and then guys were getting injured during the testing process, and then all of a sudden there was a change with sports specific. That's when
Right.
that started to kind of take effect. Because go ahead, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, hey, I remember. Sorry, you just sparked another memory. Listen, I remember that massive change because we were very cautious with testing our athletes because we were never sure where they were coming from or what happened in their off season. So we really didn't do any aggressive testing until they were under our umbrella for a while and we got to know them very well. But I do remember this, Hector. I remember Frank Thomas was with Chicago, and I
That's
remember I think he signed the first ever $10 million contract in baseball, and he was showed up to spring training and they were running 60s or something, and he blew his hamstring out. And
wow.
everybody's good. I remember everybody in baseball was going, "Oh no, what a catastrophe." That was the end of testing for a good long time in baseball just because of that. And that's, that kind of like the story you just said.
Yeah, well, they was guys like doing the shuttle run. Is that what it's called? The
Yeah,
long
the show,
run,
yeah,
and guys were blowing out hamstrings. They were doing the jumps, to see how high they can jump. They were coming down awkwardly and tearing a meniscus. There was the little things like that, and I was like, wow. And then there was a big meeting, meeting of the minds, the orthopedic surgeons and the trainers, and everybody got together, and that's when I started to hear the word sports specific. And then
right.
after that, there comes the next phase of things that changed was pitching, and then the pitching was strength and conditioning, but guys started to get a little too big sometimes, or at times, and then the weighted balls, and then like a lot of things started to come into play. So are the guys more tightly wound, and now they're using balls, and the ligaments are getting a little bit strength stretched out a little bit more than they should, in a 6 week span. And then the injuries started to like start accumulating, and in a fast, rapid pace, which is the Tommy John that we are to this day still seeing historic rates. Last year with the Strider, and there was like out of spring training, there must have been like 11 guys go down
Yeah.
last year.
Last year was crazy. And last year was an exceptional one. The 2024 season, $1.04 billion spent on players who couldn't play the game, Hector. It's a big, big problem, right? And again, everybody's trying to attack this. Hey, is it fair to say, here's my next big question here. I know there's a lot we could talk about there, but I'll pepper this in with our conversation about that because you're right. Everybody's trying to solve the problem. Here's the deal. When I look at the throwing motion in baseball, I am still to this very day fascinated, Hector. It is one of the most complex movements in all of sport. If for no other reason, if you just look at the shoulder joint, man, and how it works, the only place this whole arm is connected to my body or to anybody's body is right there where the clavicle comes to the sternum. It's balanced and functioning under the guidance of all the muscles that work together and against each other, right? And again, there is nothing like throwing a football is different. Hitting a tennis ball is different, but for pitchers, the volume, and the catchers, the volume. But there's something very, very unique about throwing that baseball that makes it one of the most complex movements in all of sport. Left unchecked, is it fair to say, Hector, that you could say it is probably the most dangerous movement in all of sport?
I will say that, yes. And like one of the things you hear that a man wasn't made or born to throw a baseball, right? That's like an uncommon thing for the body to withstand that force. But if that is the case, how did Nolan Ryan last for 27 years?
Right.
How did Tom Seaver last for all those years? How did Bob Gibson last all those years? If any of those major stars back in the day would have got hurt, there was no exit ramp, right? They had to. There was an exit ramp, retirement. There
Right.
wasn't no
Totally. Game
doctor
over.
you, right? To whatever it is that started to happen in regards to orthopedic doctors coming into the game and be able to fix you to get you back. That didn't exist back then, and so many guys were not getting hurt at the rate that these guys are getting hurt in this day and age. So what did they do? They did something totally different. And when we look, the science side looks at that time or that era, it's almost become like an obsolete time where you don't even think about that when you talk about pitching in this day and age.
Right. Oh,
There's
totally.
So many great things to get from that. Juan Marichal and Warren Spahn, they locked horns together and pitched a complete 16 inning game. They threw uh Marichal threw 227, Warren Spahn threw 201 pitches, right? They averaged like 13 point something for Marichal, who threw 227, and Warren threw like 12 point something per inning. So the innings protected them, and they didn't labor through. It was a one inning, a 1-0 game. So the most crazy part to that is that they only had a 4-man rotation. So they had
Wow.
3-day rest and had to get back on the mound. So how did those guys do it without their arms falling apart? 300 innings was like a common thing back in those days.
Yeah.
This past year, there was only 4 pitches in both leagues that pitched over 200 innings. And we're
Yeah.
talking about just scratching over 200 innings, 201, 203. And those are like the workhorses. So we've done more to protect the pitchers by bringing down the amount of innings they pitch and then protecting them through pitch counts, but they're getting hurt at a higher rate. That doesn't make sense in my mind. And I don't know how, like how people kind of like say, you know what? They are being protected, but they're getting hurt more often. So how does this make sense to anyone? You're a
Yeah.
strength and conditioning guy.
Yeah.
I'll shoot that question to you as we're here talking. What do you think in
I,
your
I love the conversation. So there was a post, speaking of those great Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan, all the great pitchers of the past. There was a post on Instagram talking about, I think it was Rick Langford, who I think still holds the major league record for most complete games in a career in a season. He was one of our coaches with us, of course, with the Blue Jays, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Rick and the way he went about teaching and managing the pitchers. But I went out there, I said, oh boy, wouldn't it, I just said something fun like, oh, wouldn't it be great to see complete games and pitchers going into the eighth and everybody rooting for a complete game or a perfect game,
Mhm.
that those days are kind of gone. And somebody wrote back and they said, hey, Crusher, you know better than that. It's adapt or die, man, in these days of, multiple pitchers and, not even starters anymore, but a leadoff to set up guy. And, it's changed so much. They said, it's not about that anymore. It's about adapt or die. And I started thinking, I said, I don't like it, man. Looking at the trends in the game, the injuries, the career length, I'm saying adapt or die. I kind of get it, but also react and die because, we saw this analytics world come in, Hector. And for me, again, we just redlined and went so far so fast. I think we're kind of working our way back to where the world makes sense. But I'll tell you this: if we look at some of the issues in the game, when we talk, to people like yourself and experts in the game, things like, of course, velocity and the push for velocity, not just at the big level, but at the youth level, Hector. And I think this is where the real crux is, man. Max effort throwing all the time. And now kids are playing year round early on. I was just in Puerto Rico. It's a big, big problem. Off season and early season workload, that's kind of that. The early specialization, the showcases and tryouts, the weighted balls, and kids playing on multiple teams. I think we're at a time of a real concerning time in the game. And I think that the players that the major league teams have, they're the survivors of a very broken youth system. Like
Mhm.
these players are damaged goods, man, before they ever even dream of getting to us, with good intentions, though. Parents, coaches, they're all trying to help them chase down their dreams. But I think we're now realizing, we're seeing firsthand the dark side of that. That's my thinking anyway.
So when you say that, I'm from New York City. That's where I grew up. You're in Canada. What do we see when it comes to sports? I saw hockey skates come on in September, to play roller hockey or ice hockey. Football came around, basketball came around. So those sports took over the time of the winter, and then January rolled around, and that's when I started to throw in a gym, nice and easy to get in shape for the season. But nowadays that doesn't exist. It's like full turn around the seasons. You're still playing all throughout the year, so the arm doesn't get the rest, the proper just recuperation from year to year. They just go and go and go. And if you're a young kid, that's only gonna last for a certain amount of time if you're throwing incorrectly, that's going to affect you even quicker than the guy who throws with an easier delivery and doesn't expose his ligaments and tendons. So
Okay,
I
here we go, mister. Yeah, I love it. Oh my goodness. Are you ready? Are you ready for this, Hector? Okay,
yeah.
listen to. So, I think, of course, you look back in the day, those guys are throwing 300 innings. They were the durability there. There's something about human beings maybe back then was a little bit different.
Uh,
Certainly how these guys grew up. Farm boys, they back in the day, they all had part-time jobs in the off season. They were doing different stuff, right? So there's a bunch of different factors there. But if I were to say this, when I look at pitching, when we start managing and programming for our pitchers, right? Performance programming, we really, really try to work with you guys, the pitching coaches, just like this. Because our job, my job, is to build an athlete that you can coach to the next level. And if you see deficits or movement patterns or maybe an area where an athlete's not or a pitcher's not moving right or things that he can't do that he needs to do, we could take him away from pitching and fix that, build that so you can coach him to the next level. So here's what I've got. Okay, see what you think of this, Hector. I've kind of narrowed it down in my mind when it comes to pitching. Okay, managing pitchers. You have the pitch count, right? That's the volume. And it's only one piece of the puzzle for me, the volume. So you have pitch count. Then you have the intensity, which is how hard they throw. And then you have the frequency, right? How often they throw and how often they throw hard, light, that all has to be managed. But this is where seeing you again in Vancouver really sparked this one for me. Okay. I call it movement efficiencies, right? How well do they actually move? I mean, even in the big leagues, you have the herky jerky guys, and sure as heck, they're broken or they're broken. But then you have guys like even not so long ago, like Paul Quantrell or Dan Plesac, right? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years in the big leagues, never injured, not once. And we manage those guys well. So, does it make sense when we talk about player management, pitch count being volume, intensity being how hard they throw, the frequency of throwing, the effort, easy, light, hard days, bullpen days, whatever it might be, and over the course of the year. And then that movement efficiency where you've really, really, really starting to, get me thinking about some cool things. Do those make sense to you?
Yes. So as you say that, like for me, I look at movement. I told you that I have a dancing background, so I learned
Yes.
through dancing, not only dancing but teaching, and then working with a partner to lift her and put her around my neck. I'm spinning. I need to understand where I'm at in space, and she also needs to trust me. But she
Yeah.
has to be in a certain way for me to press that weight up and down and bring it down smoothly. So what I see with pitching, I look at a guy who's going to dunk a basketball. When he dunks a basketball, what does he do? He squats, right? They go down. Let's say they dribble the ball. They squat. Their knees are bent. Then they go into extension, right? Hip, knee, and heel or ankle extend. Heels come off the ground. Toes come off the ground. They jump vertically. If you see a football player coming and he's going to make a tackle, what do? They go here, down, and then they explode off the ground
Sure.
through the person they're going to hit. We as pitchers, you mentioned it earlier, we pitch on an uneven surface, so it's different than any other sport. So when an uneven surface, and I look at it like if you're on the edge of a roof and a building, and you just lean forward and your head goes in front of your feet, what's happening to that body? Whoa, right down to the ground. So what I like to teach and what I like to see from the old days, what do? They used to go with their hands real high, pick up their legs real high, but they were back. So they stayed on this leg long enough so they can give their arm time. And nowadays, what do they preach? You got to move that body fast, move that mass of body of weight fast, the center of mass, as fast as you can. And what happens when I move that body, that center of mass in front of that arm, they almost disconnect and then they got to come and connect again. So what
Right.
happens? The arm doesn't get into position. So now, if you don't see that, if you don't see that, if you can't see that where the arm is really literally getting into that layback, but that layback is the hand inside 90, so the tricep and the deltoid can now get tight enough to pull the form and the hand down, right? The arm is not working in its proper form. If the arm gets here and you're trying to get the arm up and it never comes inside 90, or maybe even at 90, and your arm never got in here, your elbow can't get up, so you can pull down. Everybody talks about pull down. So if I'm pulling down, but my body's over here, what am I pulling down? I'm pulling this whole
Right.
freaking all these soft tissues into a position that they're just hanging out for dear life as far as the joint is concerned, the UCL and the rotator cuff and the labrum and all that stuff that gets injured. You can get as big as you want, but if you don't give that time, I don't care how strong you are, you're going to make it even worse if you're stronger.
Yeah.
So it's more of an incorrect movement versus a correct movement is the way I look at it. And the connection to the ground is so important because the ground is what gives me the stability to extend my joints away. So when you're in that position and your knee bends, you bend in what they call a hinge. So you go
Yep.
from a hinge into extension. So you're extending away from the ground. But most kids nowadays, they're flying so fast, they want to put the mass, lock that knee out, which is lead leg block. This hip goes up, this trunk goes over, and now you got guys pitching almost like the trunk is going over that hip, that kind of
Like a catapult almost.
right. So the way we look at it is that you want to go not crash in the wall and the passengers go flying out, right? Because you stop everything and it goes flying. I want to go through the wall. I want that back pelvis to push my deltoid,
Like
my
it.
shoulder. I want all of that to come through my glute. I have all those power, all that powerful mass of muscle that I can use combined with the ground, and that's gonna supply the power. I don't have to try to get the power with the wrong side of my body. The body's in two parts. I need the ground to work properly and work up the kinetic chain in sequence to give the arm the amount of time. And if you're doing that, there is so much power in the ground that most of my guys and everybody here that's listening to us today knows a guy named Chapman. Chapman he was going to retire. I happened to work with him right when he got off the Yankees. The Yankees left him off the roster, and he basically couldn't throw a strike to save his life at that time. Luckily enough, his agent brought him to me, and our connection together revived his career. Why? Because I showed him how to have ground connection. And now Chapman throws more efficiently now than he ever did in his life. And at the age of 35, 36, and now 37, he's going to be throwing just as hard as he did when he was a kid in baseball.
Hector, that is so awesome. I love that whole description. First of all, through the wall, the connection with the ground is everything we talk about. When we look at building a performance program for a pitcher, a position player, doesn't matter, a catcher, whatever it might be, everything we do is geared towards helping them become a better mover in space. Throwing's a movement, hitting's a movement, fielding a ball is a movement, running and moving your body through space is a movement. And you're so right, man. I love this conversation because it's all about the relationship with the ground. How well do you interact with the ground? It's a game changer. But then once you have that, of course, you also have to build the structure to get the outcome you want. And whether that's, releasing the ball or swinging the bat or, making it out, that's what it's all about. What a great thing to talk about. And Chapman, I mean, for crying out loud, we've all watched him for years be one of the most incredible throwers in the game in terms of velocity, right? Just a lethal weapon out there. So if it's okay, if he's okay talking about it.
That's
So
fine.
let's talk about all this here, man, because we've all seen him play. We're all fascinated by him. He's I love watching him throw.
Mm-hmm.
What was he like before? And what have you seen and what have you done to help him extend his career, right? Because we talk about it, Hector. Players at different stages in their careers need different things, right? So
Yes.
obviously
Yes.
early in his career, he could get away with it, right? And then he came to that part where, okay, now things are catching up. Now you revived a career. That is phenomenal.
Yeah. So when his agent came to me, and he was already hinting that he needs kind of a little bit of help. It was when he was already going down, like, because he had an infection on a tattoo that year. He had a couple of stints on the DL that had nothing to do with his arm. And then, so to make a long story short, he wasn't throwing strikes, and he couldn't be relied on to close out games. And then when the Yankees were making the roster, for the playoffs, they left him out because they didn't feel confident that he was going to do the job. They want to win. He wants to win. If he can't help the team, he can't feel that bad because at the end of the day, he's getting paid. But guys win and lose jobs. So he had basically lost his. I met him at Nova University here while the Yankees were in the playoffs. He came home for the first round. So he was throwing, and I met up with him and listening to him talk. And then I ended up doing a presentation. So I kind of like did a study on him. It's like, what went wrong? I'm not a guy that just to see information and just stay there. No, there's more to this story. So I saw a video of him working out before the season at the local park that we work at. And then I was like, wow, that doesn't look right. And then I shifted over. Let me see what he's doing with the Yankees. And he was doing exactly the same thing, which is he was going forward. His head was already on his front pelvis as he was going down the slope. So if he's on his front pelvis, the arm is going to be late. He had to pull his head out. So he was getting hit more often and he was losing velocity and he was disconnecting. I only talk about that ground connection. So
Yeah.
anyway, when I saw him there, I was like, let me go back to what he did in Cincinnati when he was throwing 105 miles an hour. And it was a total different delivery. And that's when I made the connection. And then when I went to present to him, I showed him the difference. I said, look at you in a workout, look at you at Yankee Stadium, look at you with Cincinnati. And then I told him after I showed him that, I said, my job is not to make you somebody that I want to make you into what my vision is. I need to get you back to being a Roldis Chapman, the way you move the best way. And then
Oh,
once we accomplished it, he was so happy with that. He was like, when do we start? So it took a little while. And we just started with the mechanical part, and then I started to find out that he lost confidence with his hand-eye coordination. He really, literally could not throw the ball to the target. So I had to like roll up my sleeves, and
classic hips, maybe.
there was more to this than met the eye.
Yeah.
So so
Right.
now so now it's the hand-eye coordination part that he had kind of like lost it a little bit. And I have a target and I had him throw to the target and he was missing the target. So I asked him, I said, can you do me a favor? Can you just think about staying connected, but getting to full extension between your toe and your hand. So you're completely connected to the ground, but getting out there. I just want you to physically do that, but I want you to close your eyes and trust your body parts to get extended. And let's just see where the ball goes. And he hit the target right smack dead in the middle.
Oh,
And then he goes, the funny thing is that he had his eyes closed and he kept them closed through the throw. And he just heard the sound, but he didn't know where the ball went. So the ball hit the target, and basically it was like my shifting him back to understand the hand-eye coordination and the connection to the ground. So he hit the target, and then the next part was since he was kind of concerned to throw the ball away, he was holding the ball like really loose. So like when he would throw, you could see that there was something wrong with the release. And then I just asked him, how much are you holding the ball? How much pressure are you applying on your fingers and on the ball? And he said about 4% out of 10. And I said,
mm,
can you do me a favor? Can you press into a 6% as opposed to a 4? And he squeezed the ball a little bit, and that was what the connection between the rest of the levers. They were all in conjunction with each other or working in hand with each other. And then I said, can you do me a favor? Can you bring it up to an 8? Squeeze it a little harder. And that was something that was in the rearview mirror after that. He was able to now not worry about.
I love it. You got the message coming from the ground this way. You got the message from the ball coming this way. And I love what you said, Hector. And this is something everybody in the game of baseball needs to listen to. And a lot of people know this, but if you haven't heard this before, you said something that's magical for me. You know, um, get you back to moving the way you move. I believe this is one of the problems in the game today is, we're trying to pigeonhole everybody into a certain style of movement. And young athletes or young pitchers, especially as they're growing, they can't do their bodies aren't ready to do some of the things you might want them to do as a pitcher. Like, one of the big issues that was sort of identified, in the trending injury issues that we're seeing in the game was the emphasis on stuff and pitch design, where they're getting pitchers with the Rapsodo and the spin rates and all this information we can get now. They're getting players to do stuff they probably normally either wouldn't do naturally or they literally can't do naturally. And they're asking them to do it, and then not just do it, but emphasize it. So I love this concept, Hector, of getting back to moving the way you move. Now that's a special thing, and I
Mhm.
think you have to be a pretty experienced coach for that as well. Is that fair?
It is fair. So the last part to this whole thing to come together is he was throwing and playing catch with a guy named Ronald Bolaños, who also played in the big leagues, and it was just them two and myself. And then I asked him, I said, "Can I challenge you to something?" And he was already buying into everything I said to him. So I asked him, I said, "Can when you look at the glove, what do you look at?" He goes, "Like, what am I supposed to look at? The glove. That's what I see." I said, "Can you do me a favor and look a little more profound, see if you can see a lace or a light coming through the webbing and like really focus on that. But I do not want you to aim because more likely than not, you're going to aim with your hand and now you're going to prevent your hand from being as loose as it possibly can. I want you to aim with your eyes and whatever you're looking at, just try to put the ball there. Put the ball to where you're looking at and just throw it like as hard as we're throwing, but do not try to stop your arm or pinpoint. See it and just put the ball where you're looking at." And he hit the glove 5 times in a row. And
Oh,
then he stepped back and he goes, "I've never done that in my life." And I was like, this is a Aroldis Chapman telling me he's never done that in his life, which is pitching the big leagues and hit a glove, and you've never done that. So anyway, to make a long story short, that also became part of the development of that winter where he ended up going to Kansas City and was the first player taken in the trading deadline stretch. He got taken, I think, in the first, second, or third day of that stretch, and that stretch goes crazy at July 31st. And in June he was already in Texas, but it was based on what he did. That changed his whole career around. And I was there by myself with him, kind of he was in a vulnerable state. I was in a teaching state, and it was like a perfect match at that time for him to revive his
I love
career.
it. Hey, we always say, Hector, it doesn't matter where you're at or what sport you're doing or what you're doing, humans, right?
Hmm.
Nobody does it alone, man. And again, it gets back to that relationship thing you and I talked about, right?
Hmm. Right now,
Especially,
right now, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. But right now, I have nobody. Like this guy was in the lamplight. This guy was a world in the World Series. This guy was an all star. He was a closer. He set records. He's now with me making a comeback. His name is Jerry's Familia. Every day he's excited, calling me. Man, I haven't felt like this. He threw his first bullpen like at 89 miles an hour. He goes, I never really throw this hard in bullpens. And then the last in 1 week he came back. He was at 94.
yeah,
So he's
wow.
excited. He feels he's going to be like 96, 97 this week.
Hey
So,
Hector, so look, we see all this. Everybody's digging for answers, man, right? And rightfully so, especially if you don't know what you know, or you know what you and I know, or collectively, right? There's a lot of knowledge from over the years. Everybody's look. There's no listen. There's no magic bullets. There's no secret formula. If I often say to every pitcher, right from way back in the Blue Jay days, hey, listen, if it's in there, we'll get it, but let's just make sure you're ready for it, right?
mm,
Talking about velocity and throwing hard. And I remember, if we, who can we think about? I mean, Billy Koch. Oh my goodness. When I first came to the Blue Jays, same time Billy was there. He was coming off of his Tommy John. We rehabbed him. He never threw 100 miles before that, 100 miles an hour of that. But once we got him set up and we built him back from that surgery, he was throwing 101, 102, 100 mile an hour. He was one of the first guys in the game at the big league level to do it consistently. There was no magic there. It was just the process, Hector, of really working with the pitching coaches, working with Billy, and really helping him organize himself so he could withstand and create that kind of pressure. Halladay was the same thing. Halladay got to the point where he could throw 96, 97, 98. But if you remember, he started getting arm pain and he backed it down and he just hovered. He hovered around, I think, 94, 95 in there, 93, but he could hump it up for sure. But it was but he kind of knew the limitations. So, with all of the young players now and this pressure and this emphasis on velocity, is it what would be your message? I mean, is it fair to say there's no magic book? There's fundamentals.
mm,
Everybody's different. Again, getting back to what you said here, I've got a huge star in my notes here about this, getting you back to moving like you move, right?
mhm.
That's so important, man. I think right now, with good intentions, we're trying to get young athletes and even our pro guys doing things that they maybe physically can't do, or maybe they're not ready to do, right?
Yes. So, like again, I do certain things that I learned. I didn't come up with this. I didn't invent anything. I just
Right.
learned it when I was at the Dodgers. Rick Honeycutt, Rafi Chavez, the whole Ramon Martinez. Everybody was on board together. Charlie Huff was there. I know he was a knuckleballer. Uh,
Yeah.
Rick Roden. There was so many people, but they all came together. When I learned that system and I started to apply it, that's when I started, like I told you earlier, I started to believe in it because I started to see all these names just get to the big leagues. I also had two catchers that got to the big leagues back to back years that I had them. One, Rafael Merchan, is Rio Muto's backup in Philadelphia, and the
Yeah.
other one is Ohapi, who's in California. They were my two catchers who knew nothing about pitch calling or sequencing, and I was basically able to teach them how to handle a pitching staff and call a good game. And before you know it, they had the talent, obviously, but they got to the big leagues in about 2 years as well, each of those guys. But getting back to your question in regards to what you see nowadays, right? It's a little different with the moving of the body fast and the plyo balls and all that. We do not use plyo balls. We move contrary to what they do. They move fast. We move slow. If we learn how to move perfectly slow, you can move efficiently fast. But the ground thing is the most important part, the connection that the body has with the ground to be able to disconnect from that ground. With all of the resistant bands that we have, we make them and position the pitcher in the perfect position in slow motion so they can feel it. And now they go a little faster and a little faster. When we put them on the mound with a towel, let's go down the slope, but you got to stay back. I have a band, I'll put it on their waist, and then they have to fight me down that slope to stay connected to the ground, and then it just releases. But every single one of the guys we work with, man for man, gains 3-4 miles an hour on their fastball,
Going slow, right?
going
That's
perfectly slow and efficiently fast.
Yeah.
and,
So
and,
would it be safe to say your approach is kind of like reverse engineering, getting back to the basics and then building through it so the guys feel what it should feel like. And then when they step outside that box, they're going, oh, that does not feel right. I love that.
well, I'm on this island, they're on this island, and we need to build a bridge to
Yeah,
complete that
right.
bridge and get that guy to come all the way over to what my vision is. We need to do a bunch of things that get that bridge to come together so he can come over very easily. And easily is mapping out everything that we do is to reinforce the movement. It does not matter what station they're in. Let's say if they're in a band station, I put bands all over their limbs so they can be on a fence doing the resistant work. They could be off the fence with resistant work. We have heavy balls, but the heavy balls are not to throw hard. They're to coordinate the body, to get the legs to start pushing. We don't like to rotate because if you rotate early, that opens up the front side. So we're into driving. The driving is pushing. So we push into the throw where the last piece is the rotation. So the
Right.
ground is taking us into the point where the quad, let's say the pelvis pushes the trunk, which would be, I would say, since this is in the front side, it would be like my rib cage and my pec to my deltoid to my tricep to my elbow to my hand. So everything has to be in perfect sequence to get all the soldiers lined up behind the hand versus what you see nowadays. If I open up this way, if this shoulder goes that way, this shoulder goes that way, and my arms are attached to them. And now I'm going more on a roundabout to try to get to the point of release versus having a 2-lane highway. Boom. From
Boom.
back
You're
to
talking
front,
like linear movement there, right?
linear movement. That's when everybody talks about it. Sometimes I see that they don't understand it because if the heel disconnects early, you're going into rotation. You're not going to go, you can't stay back anymore. You can't. What we do is we have everybody talks about the knee and the tibia going vertically to the ground. So if
Right.
that happens, the foot literally goes this way. The ankle goes into the ground, and then the knee kind of pulls the heel in front, not up. You don't want to go in the opposite direction. You want to go this way, and then go through the bunion into the toe, not bypass the bunion, go to the toe because now I'm rotational and I've actually disconnected. And then what do you see?
Sequence by
Disconnection.
sequence by sequence.
It's tendon, ligament by ligament to the muscle. The skeletal structure gets controlled by that.
I love it. And I love your comment about the plyo balls too, the weighted balls, not using them at the run and gun, throwing maximum throws like some of the programs. which have been shown to be, you have to be very, very careful with that stuff. But I like it. And we do this as well, I think, Hector. We use
Mhm.
it sort of as a feedback system. So the guys can feel, hey, am I in the right place? Or how to apply pressure properly, right?
Well, we don't use plywood. We use TheraBand. TheraBand sells balls different weight. They have
Love it. You're right.
the
Yeah.
rubber pellets. And again, they're not to throw. We throw them, but we throw them like right in front because the idea is to get your big mass muscles to help you get extended. And
Gotcha.
you start to see that the kid gets pronated naturally. Nowadays, guys are pulling off and their thumb is out here, so they're supinated and they're helping a kid stay with this supination. And wow, we have the sweeper, but that guy could get fixed. That guy can get to pronation if and when his delivery allows him to. But if my delivery is taking me this way, I'm gonna always come around that baseball. I'm gonna have lower spin efficiency, and I'm gonna have that breaking ball that everybody's talking about nowadays. But go ahead.
Yeah. And for everybody out there that doesn't understand some of the lingo, look, supination is like going to the outside, pronation is coming towards the
Yeah.
middle. And you want your pitchers, you want actually every throwing athlete to pronate after the throw. That's just sort of the natural body's movement, right?
So I have two guys right now with whose familia has poor spin efficiency. And so does I have another big leaguer with me, Andrew Vasquez. He was, I mean, Andrew threw his fastball basically way out there. So they're in the Rapsodo numbers. They're in the 80, 80, 85, 83 range as far as the spin efficiency. We
Right.
did one adjustment, get them to use a little bit more of the lag. Get out there, all of a sudden 94, 95 spin efficiency. That's like almost impossible to get, but when you know what you're doing and you get the guy to use his body properly, that you'll increase that.
And it's a better, more natural place to be as well, right? Just the
Yeah,
way we're organized as human beings, right?
without a doubt, without a doubt. So I've learned how to use the Rapsodo, for example. That's what I have. I have it my own personal one. So I've learned how to use those numbers and fix a deficiency in those numbers to get it where it's right. Right now we have a kid named Vladimir Gutierrez. He pitched lights out in Mexico, pitched lights out in the Dominican. There is no way this guy doesn't have a job. He dominated. But then it was like, why is nobody calling? Because on the Rapsodo, his spin efficiency his spin direction is off. So if they see these numbers say 130, 145, 2 o'clock, then they're staying away from that because they say that's a regular fastball. That's just like um, run of the mill type of fastball.
Yeah.
We need the guy that's at 1 o'clock or inside the minutes, or the guy that's at 230, 215 because he's more sidearm. But the guy in between doesn't play, so they won't sign him. So if I go by what he did in the Dominican, I would never know why they're not signing him. But now we're attacking the reason they're not signing him to get him back to where he should be.
Right. Because he was lights out in Dominican, lights out in Puerto Rico. I wonder if sometimes, Hector, we don't eliminate some of the natural talent by overemphasizing some of these numbers. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's again, the machine is telling them what the guy is, but possibly Maddox and guys of that stature that were able to change speeds and drive hitters crazy would probably not have a job in this day and age because the numbers, obviously, velocity is way down, and it doesn't recognize the ability for that guy to change speeds, to have the presence in mind that this goes here at this particular time because he's looking for that. They don't do that nowadays. Is like uh, get swings and misses. If you get a swing and miss, that your pitch is unhittable, and the guy's trying to meet everything with launch angle, and there's more strikeouts, more base on balls. There's so much more different things that are not efficient in this day and age that were efficient in the old days. Guys used to use the field more, more. They if they made a mistake, they caught the ball out front. That's when they would hit a home run. They weren't geared to try to just hit a home run looking middle in and staying middle in the whole time. And if they strikeout doesn't mean anything. It's just another out. It's not going to steal bases. They're not going to bunt. They're not going to do those things that kind of gave away outs, like they say. They're going to let the guy swing. And if you strike out, it's okay. So,
And
guys
we're
are
seeing
striking
that
out.
guys with 200 plus strikeouts getting hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Because they do connect once in a while. They
I
connect
remember
once in a while.
when I played, I was with the California Angels in the minor leagues, and we had one guy, I think it was Tim Salmon,
Oh
that
yeah,
yeah, Tim Salmon struck out like 172 times, and that was like, oh my God, that's a lot, And nowadays 200, it's been eclipsed like nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Hector,
Yeah,
a couple more questions. Man, what a great day. What a great conversation this has been. I really appreciate it. Talking about all the changes, do you think there's an organization that sees the light in the near future and starts maybe gravitating back towards some of that competitiveness, some of that pitching acumen? Still peppering in all the technology, but getting back to some of those hardcore pitching basics. Do you see that ever happening?
I think it's very difficult because it's like all those people that were in the game that got kind of like shifted, and basically got uh, sidetracked from the game. You're not part of the game anymore because you don't understand this phenomenon that's coming into play. So you have those people that knew what you're talking about right now that are like becoming extinct in a way.
Yeah, right.
So where do you go to? If we've been doing this for so long and those guys don't exist, who's gonna take the baton and be able to go back to what those guys used to know? So it's like a thing of the past in a way, because we've gone, like the fork in the road, and we're getting further and further from that point, and guys start to, get older, retire, or pass away, and that's no longer here. So how do we get back there? Is my question.
Yeah, the point of no return, maybe. Hopefully, we're not there yet, because I still think there's room for a lot of that stuff. Actual, man. You see some of these guys who were just hardcore pitchers, man. Not great velocity, some good stuff, but man, they just knew how to attack hitters, right?
Well, they people say that, in this day and age that they throw so hard. Yes, they're geared to throw hard, and there are more guys throwing 100. But there were guys that were throwing hard back then, but
Yeah,
the gun registered different. Like they have that gun that it was called a ray gun, that they say Nolan Ryan threw whatever 105, 104 miles an
right,
hour, and in reality is scientifically they made the formula that came up with it was 108.9 or something like that. So guys were throwing hard back then, but hard was 4 or 5 miles off the fastball that we see today, because it's getting read off the fingertips. If you
right,
look at a stalker gun, it reads peak and it reads the what crosses the plate, which is what the ray gun used to get. So a guy throwing 89 is really throwing 82, 83.
sure,
You don't see that. I was with Pat Borders in Clearwater, and I was like, Pat, look at this. Look, he's throwing 89 over there. Look how he's crossing the plate at 82, 83. So that has a lot to do with, this velocity change, because the gun that came and changed everything back then was a ray gun to a jugs gun. The jugs gun is what a stalker gun is today, and it started reading it out the fingertips, and guys started
great
throwing
point.
hard immediately.
Yeah,
So guys like Dwight Gooden might be 94, right?
sure, or
Back then,
more.
he was really 99, 98 in this day and age.
Exactly right.
And Pedro Martinez pitched with me in Albuquerque. He was 94 in Albuquerque. I go to the big leagues, he's sitting 98, 99. Pedro
Yeah.
Martinez.
Pedro Martinez was so fun to watch. Hey, listen, last story, because I know we're almost at an hour here, but listen, I remember one spring training, 2001, 2002, maybe, and we were getting close to spring training. So, the starting lineups were in for like 5, 6 innings at this point, and we were playing Boston, and Pedro was pitching, man. And I remember being in the dugout. We were at their place. I remember being out. The hitters would come in, just shaking their head, said, "There's no chance." Like nobody can hit that. He threw a 5 inning no hitter, and nobody even came close. He was just dealing, man, just playing with the hitters. It was so fun to watch, and I don't know if we see that much anymore.
We don't, because the guys are trying to throw as hard as they can. But I have a Pedro Martinez story. I was with the Mets, and he was with the Mets towards the end of his career, and he was having a like a bunion problem. Like that's where his injury was, on his foot. So
Yeah,
anyway, I brought he was a fifth starter for the Mets, and he was making that start in spring training. You know how the team leaves, but the fifth starter stays back so he could throw a game and
yeah,
then be ready for the next start. So it was his day to pitch, and I brought all of my rookie pitchers behind him. So he had about 25 pitchers behind him while he was warming up before he goes in the game. And he did not miss a spot. I mean, literally, he told the catcher like a little bit over. He did not miss a spot. But then I see him 6, 7 months later in the Dominican, and he comes to me, goes, Hector, you know what? The day that I threw that day that you brought all those kids behind me, you don't know what you did to me. I was gonna show those kids what a pitcher and how a major league pitcher warms up like. And I
Oh,
was like, so it affected you. I was trying to teach them how a big league pitcher warms up, and you took that to heart, and you basically were going to show them. It was a challenging moment for him, and I didn't realize that I was doing it to him. But
one of the
that's
greatest pitchers ever in the game, man. He had a compete level like nothing else, man. Oh, he was so fun to watch. Hector, listen, man, what a great conversation. Maybe to wrap up here, listen, we know the issues in the game go well beyond the pro game. For the
Mhm.
young developing athletes, the families of those athletes, pitchers, position players, the coaches of the youth development pitchers. Hey, any final words for that population out there, Hector, from your standpoint now as one of the premier pitching coaches in the industry?
Well, I mean, since I'm here and if they're watching and they're listening, I would recommend they go to see my page, because
Yep.
I have a lot of fun videos and the big leaguers that I work with so they can see what I talk about, that ground connection. All of the pitches I work with all have that, like it's like a signature move that we all, they all move in nice sequence and smooth, but we create velocity and power because of the ground, not the bodies, but the ground. Um, so compare what we do with what you see in the market, and look at the disconnection of the heel early. Look at that head get to the pelvis before front foot strike. If that happens, the arm is going to be late. All we're trying to do to help these kids is keep their head over the back pelvis as long as possible so the arm has enough time to get into position. When they start throwing hard with their pec and not their legs, they get their pec out in front of their legs, that arm's going to be late, and that's usually where problems start to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Forget about pliables and all that, because that's going to compound the problem. It's going to help them get to an injury quicker if you got weight on top of that.
Hey, if you're not moving properly and you're adding more stress and more resistance, that is a recipe for disaster, and that's what we're seeing too. And also, any thoughts on just this rush for velocity? We're seeing high school programs, even junior high programs, trying to get these young players throwing at maximum levels that probably for a lot of those young pitchers are beyond their natural means.
Well, I'm going to say that if there's a guy there behind you and with a gun and trying to encourage you to throw harder and harder and harder, I stay away from those people. That's my personal opinion, because we're not chasing velocity. Chapman, Familia, Gutierrez, uh, Ranger Suarez, none of them had a gun, right, to see and measure. We're all based on technique, the proper form, and then the velocity will come. And
Oh,
usually we get all surprised because the velocity comes in through the back door. We don't force it through the front door. We don't knock the door down to get it in there. We do the technique right, and the velocity shows its face at the very end through the back door.
boom, through the wall, man, through the wall, right?
Absolutely. You want to
I
use
love
your
it.
legs and your hips to give the sequences to the trunk up top and give the arm plenty of time to lay back and release. And I try to get to pronation as best as I possibly can, not get on the outside of that elbow.
And I love it. We always say if it's in there, we'll get it. It's a process. So it's a process. Hey, everybody, hlbpitching.com. Check out Hector's great stuff. So much good information. Hector, thanks so much for this. Man, I'm so glad to see you in Vancouver. And I'm just really, really happy to just talk shop with you here. It's so fantastic to see everything you're doing in the game. Such great stuff.
So before I go, I'm a pitching coach, but I invented a target called Pro Command. You can get that on Amazon. You can get that on my website. And I also wrote a book by the name of Unleash the Pitcher in You.
Right.
It's on
Yes.
Amazon as well, and you can order it. It's all my little the secret sauce that I have of all the 23 years as a coach and 9 as a pitcher, all combined into just giving you the inside track on what I did to have my pitchers have success on the mound.
I love it. And we'll put links for that in the show posts there, Hector, for sure. You better believe it. Great stuff. All right, mister. Thanks so much for everything you do. And thanks for your time today, Hector.
Thank you, Jeff, and it's an honor to be with you again. It's incredible how we combined. I mean, we came together in Vancouver, and look at us now, continuing the process. So hopefully, it's not the last time that we're doing things together.
Oh, no. Much more to come, my friend. Much more to come.
All right. Well, take care and thank you for having me.
Okay, that was one of the fastest hours I've ever spent doing anything. All of a sudden I looked over and boom, we're at an hour and 5 minutes. It went by for me in the wink of an eye, but such great insight and thoughts there. And again, even if you're not in baseball, think about what he's saying. What is the prime directive for Hector and his pitchers? The ground. What is our top 5 priorities in athlete development? If you are seasoned Crush listeners, you know what our priorities are. If you're new to the show, listen to me carefully. We have 5 priorities when we are designing and organizing performance plans for athletes. Doesn't matter what sport, doesn't matter what age, doesn't matter if they are seasoned veterans of the most elite level of their sport. 5 priorities before we even talk about sport specific. And that is sleep, rest, and recovery, the number 1 priority. Okay. Nutrition, hydration, number 2, posture, range of motion, function, number 3, and then movement. And where does movement happen, everybody? Where does it happen? If I were to ask you, what would you say? Okay, if you listen to the show, you've heard this 100 times, I apologize, but I can't stress this enough. Movement happens between your feet and the ground. Everything you do depends on your interaction with your environment. Swimming, movement happens in the force you can apply to the water. In skiing, how you interact with the snow. On the ice, skating with our hockey guys, it's how you interact and apply force to the ice, whether you're shooting, skating, transitioning, or jostling with another player, right? It all happens with the ground. And Hector, time and time again, the ground, using that ground reaction, that interaction with the ground to travel up the body to the ball to get a result, right? That's what it's all about. And it's music to my ears. When you have a performance program, the athlete side, that is very similar in mindset to the technical, tactical side of your sport, you will find out how good your athlete can be. You really will. That's how it works. And so that there's so many great things here. You know, when he talked about with Chapman, you know, taking him out of what he was doing for so many years as his career was starting to decline, and then rebuilding him, getting him back to moving the way he naturally moves. Something that he got away from for whatever reason. Maybe it was because he was trying to throw harder than he actually could. Or maybe he was injured. Or maybe his body got out of balance. That posture, range of motion part is more important than you might think, especially for those one-sided sports. It can be a spiral, a disastrous spiral, right? That sort of feeds on itself. Here you have asymmetries in the body. You have one-sided movement that develops and exacerbates those one-sidedness, those trends in the body. And if it's not corrected, if you don't have a strategic plan to correct that stuff, it gets out of balance. And what has to happen in order to function properly, athletes have to alter how they move to get the job done. Okay. And that's something that we take very seriously, and you should as well. And as we see athletes and players progress through their development and through their careers, there are different priorities. For young athletes, the priorities are very, very different from a 5-year veteran of a professional sport. In the 5-year veterans, our thought process is more injury prevention and staying healthy. Not to say that we don't attack some performance parameters, but for the most part, we're trying to keep them healthy so they can play as long as they can at that level. For our young athletes, well, we're sort of matching their growth and development as they grow, develop, enter their sport, the elite pathways, the high performance pathways, and then we start attacking their performance as needed. And it's a long game, right? It's a long game. And one of the things that Hector mentioned that I thought was really great was the idea of not trying to throw hard, but throwing harder is just the result, the outcome of training properly. That's what I'd rather see. And again, I think if we look at the injury trends in the game at every level, we are trying to do things in terms of velocity and throwing hard that some of these athletes have not earned yet. They haven't earned the right. It's not even safe because their bodies aren't prepared for it yet. All right. And so we never really get the radar gun out. And it was so great to hear Hector say that we don't radar gun our athletes, even our pro guys. We always say, if it's in there, we'll get it, right? Now, there's a point where we might want to evaluate that part of their game, and we might get the radar gun out to see where they're at, or to get a baseline. Hey, where are you throwing right now? Okay. And if you are humping it up, trying to throw harder, what are the dangers? What are the dangers of trying to do that? And it is dangerous, very dangerous. But I like this idea that Hector has of just learning how to coordinate and self-organize the body to get that outcome. It's not rocket science. Starts with the ground and it builds its way up. Oh my gosh, so many great things. So many great things. And I think, one of the big messages here is you can't do it alone. All right. So go on Hector's website, hlbpitching.com, and check out his stuff. Think about it. Ask questions. Get back to me, info@jeffgershell.com. If you have questions, comments, smart remarks, we answer every single email we get. And with our young players that we're working with, we have players as young as 14 years old. We have 5-6 year plans for these guys. And the families are sitting back now going, okay, I understand the plan now. There's no rush. The average age for a player breaking into Major League Baseball is older than any of the other professional sports. The average age for Major League Baseball is right around 24. The other sports are 20, 22. You will see a player break in at 18 years old. There's no question you have those young phenoms breaking in, but they continue to excel and get better while they're there, as the 24-year-olds do. But if we have a 14-year-old that we're working with right now, and we know that the average age of a player entering Major League Baseball, signing his first contract, is 24, we've got 10 years. There is no rush for this young player to be an elite performer, for starters, but also there's no rush to throw hard. We'd rather build and slowly progress as they go through their proper growth and development, as those long bones start to grow, make sure they're safe. Make sure they're coordinated, make sure their bodies adapt to whatever height they get to, whatever their playing weight's going to be. That continues into their 20s. But when we have a 14-year-old, I can tell you this right now, we're already thinking, or at least I'm planning to 18 years of age. And then from 18, I'm planning into the early 20s. All right. And it's so a slow progressive development. We have a plan. The only way you can make meaningful adjustments for any player is if you have a structured plan. It's the only way. You can't make meaningful adjustments just flying by the seat of your pants. And I think that's another thing that Hector does so well with his players. So just great stuff. Show number 2 of our baseball series coming up. We're going to talk more about analytics. We're going to talk about the hitting side. I want to get into, with this analytic age we're in, what numbers are important? What numbers do you look at? And how do you use those numbers to guide a player's performance at the elite level, but also through their growth and development? Because listen, creating coachable players is a long game. If you understand that process and the windows of opportunity as athletes grow and develop, we will find out how good they can get. And I guarantee there is no question in my mind, we will reduce the risk of injury or the incident of injuries in our athletes. There's no doubt. We have very, very few athletes who get injured, and that is not a mistake. That's just incredible teamwork with our doctors and our therapists, our coaches, and our strength and conditioning staff, everybody working together to plan this out and manage the athletes as they chase down their dreams, which is what it's all about. All right. So there you go. You guys, if you have any questions about today's show, please do reach out. info@jeffgershell.com is the website. You can follow me on all social media. Search out Crush Performance or Jeff Gershell. We're there. Direct message me if you have any questions, or email me for sure. And more baseball coming up next week. We'll see you then, everybody. Have a good one. Talk to you then.
Find out what it takes to be a top performer. Get the Crush blog, podcast, and newsletter at crushperformance.com.